Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everyone, from wherever you're joining. Uh, this presentation on the rising from the Rubbles, supporting post-earthquake recovery from the most vulnerable families in Nepal. So it's a pleasure to present in this conference, second global conference, Gobeshona, if I pronounce that right. So we have been we had the 2015 earthquake in Nepal, and that has its own difficulties for us to cope through the damages done, people's lives lost. But even after 5 or 6 years of support going out through the government, us humanitarian agencies, and like many others joining hands to support these people in need of support, they still are, like we found that there still are people who are left behind. And that is how we developed and designed the project that we'll be talking about in this presentation. So like we presenting here today are CRS. I'm representing CRS, and we have Lumanti and Sapros that are implementing a project on vulnerable support. But we are we'll be talking more of beyond the project on like how this whole experience of supporting the vulnerable in Nepal has been, what our lessons are like, and how we are learning from those lessons and implementing right now. So if I may, I'll move on to the next slide. So a brief session plan here for your reference. We're trying to take the first initial 10 minutes to set the context on like what we're talking about, right? So that we are on the same page and we discuss through the topic. Second would be the sharing from Sapros and Lumanti on the approaches and learnings from vulnerable support focused programming they have been doing since a long time, but also specifically linked to 2015 earthquake and recovery. We'll have key reflections on like what did we talk about, so that I'll try and summarize the discussion points. And we have also lined up our commentators, very respected experts in their respective field, to share about like the overall recovery and response in Nepal, and additionally like how the presentation, the content being shared by Sapros, Lumanti, and CRS connects with what the needs were of the time, and then like how it aligned with the support needed by the vulnerable and delivery by us collectively. And then we'll open the floor for general discussions and Q&A. Please keep them coming through the Q&A sections in the webinar module, as well as as general comments in the chat, whatever you feel comfortable with. I'll be trying to monitor and then floor them as much as possible to get appropriate responses. On the agency side, like we have three agencies, like I said, CRS, Lumanti, and Sapros. So we'll be presenting on, like I said, our ideas and more focus on vulnerable support through a project called Recover. You all know, like CRS is an international NGO based in the United States, but we have been working in more than 100 countries for supporting people in need of affected by emergencies, fighting diseases, and trying to end poverty and nurturing and building peaceful societies. In Nepal, we have been more active after the 2015 earthquake, supporting the need, and that need is still there, where we are continuing our support through a project called Recover, like I said. Lumanti is a non-profit organization well known in this region. They have dedicated their efforts to alleviating poverty in Nepal and improvement of shelter conditions for a lot of people. And they are our implementing partners for shelter and DRR components. Sapros is a non-profit organization working with the aim to reduce the poverty in Nepal by assisting rural communities in building proactive infrastructures, mobilizing local resources, and promoting meaningful participation in decision-making and planning. And they have been champions of livelihood support to small landholders and vulnerable communities in Nepal. And they are implementing the livelihoods and WAS component of this project Recover. We have also lined up, like I was saying earlier, three distinguished guests as commentators to share their perspective on overall recovery index in Nepal, and additionally their perspective on the content being shared by these implementing agencies for vulnerable support in Nepal. We have Professor Dr. Sangeeta Singh. She is a professor in urban planning and deputy director at the Center for Disaster Studies at the Institute of Engineering at Tribhuvan University. We have Mr. Kabir Das Rajbhandari, who is a WAS professional with more than 20 years of professional experience in infrastructure development, particularly water sanitation and hygiene sector. And we have Mr. Mahavir Acharya, who is an engineer by training and one of the founder members of Hunarshala Foundation. Most important, like linking directly to the work in Nepal, like he has a broad experience in the post-disaster rehabilitation in India, as well as he was involved in post-earthquake rehabilitation work in Nepal. He's part of government of Nepal's initiative to rebuild the earthquake-affected houses in Nepal. Uh, okay. So we all know it has been what almost 7 years now, come May, that we were very unfortunate with the incidents of Gorkha earthquake. It was a massive 7.8 magnitude earthquake that occurred in central Nepal, and then like eastwards, it had a lot of districts. Altogether, 32 districts out of the 75 were affected. So almost 50% of the country was affected. And like we had around 840,000 participants that required direct assistance in rebuilding. There were more that sustained other types of difficulties, damages to their property, disruption to their lives. Like I said, it was a huge disaster, and that specifically to a country like Nepal, which is small, developing, has limited resources, was a huge tax. But there were important steps and learning spotted on from like other disasters, importantly for the development of PDNA, post-disaster needs assessment documents, and then like based on that, the PDRF was very helpful. There were multiple sectors where the support was identified as needed, and the like CBOs, NGOs, INGOs, all the non-governmental partners were asked to provide the socio-technical assistance so that the government support leads to exact a rebuilding of a nation at large, and like making sure that those people were supported, knew like the technology of like how to do things and did it properly. Like I was talking about the numbers, like the government at this point says around 92% of the people, of the population requiring reconstruction because of the direct damages from the earthquake have reconstructed. But again, there are like large number of people that are still left behind. And if we like combine that with the settings of urban and rural, the multidimensional poverty, the vulnerability that has multiple layers, we through our assessments and like implementation in Nepal saw that there were many people who are still left behind. And with like on closer scrutiny, we've identified these people who are still left behind, still struggling to have a proper shelter above their heads, to protect their families were the vulnerables, like the people who are landless, who didn't have the proper documents, who didn't have the means to make their ends meet, let alone establish a shelter. So like there was this whole motion of like building back better and leaving no one behind, but we are contemplating of like how far we were able to drive those notions with these people behind, and that is how together with the government, with like identifying the needs and then like trying to design a project that supports these needs, we developed a project that we call Recover, and like trying to ensure that in the areas that we implement, we're trying to leave no one behind. People who didn't have the means, they are supported to have a shelter, restore their lives. This is the distribution. This is directly correlating, as was we were like looking at this earlier, directly correlating with the population density, where there are more people, they are more vulnerable to be supported. But there still are a large number of people that require this support, and they are very, and this is very crucial at this juncture, as much of the supporting hands on post-earthquake recovery and reconstruction are gone. In this, like their resources are allocated differently. They are like more streamlined programming into the developmental areas that were pre-disaster. So like CRS and a few agencies are only limited to post-earthquake recovery, and we still see a need. We this is a second year of implementation for Recover, and then we have already supported at around 1,400 participants to rebuild their house. So if supported, people are willing, those vulnerable people, to establish a shelter above their heads. All those the colleagues from agencies will also be talking on this, but all this was possible as the government was willing. We need to have that willingness from the government. If there is not, we should be investing our resources to make those environments, those favorable conditions to support the guidelines, to support the vulnerable. This was particularly in the development of the guidelines, how they needed the extra support. They had the extra needs, they had the extra vulnerabilities, recognition of that, and inclusion of those support mechanisms in the existing blanket coverage for the population on the government side was a big achievement. We achieved it like maybe late in the timeline. It was May 2018 that the CBOs, the INGOs were asked to go out and support if they can within their resources with top-ups, and the government themselves were opening up their finances to provide extra support. There are some numbers that I don't want to go through in the details, but there was like this government push and desire that the NGOs, that the vulnerables should be supported extra, and that is how all this programming and support from INGOs, CBOs, as well as the government was diverted to the support the vulnerable. And it's still like we're reaching a milestone of around 1992, but it's still those 10% is still accounts for around 100,000 like families that are in need. So I'll talk very briefly about what the recovery is. It is a project through CRS, a 3-year project focused on vulnerable support that aims to support around 6,000 households through 2023. It has an integrated programming approach that we learned from multiple other programs that we implemented previously, support modalities that were different, and then like learnings from those are brought into this project to like design a integrated project that delivers shelter, the DRR, disaster risk reduction components, the components of livelihoods, how the people's livelihood could be restored and strengthened. And there are components of WAS specifically on the water systems restoration and reconstruction, linking with the livelihood again. So it is a integrated project there. And then like we were questioning earlier about like if we have been achieving the ambitions of leave no one behind, and in this project at least like we are trying to go through like the communities, all the government tiers, identifying, making sure that those who are like left willing and like affected by the earthquake are supported like is required by them, and like to ensure that a shelter is established above their heads for their families. So it is the goal that we like earthquake affected households rebuild their lives and livelihoods, and then we have 2 distinct objectives. One is that they have a safe home by the end of the project, and then the other is that they have improved the economic resilience and opportunities. So on these like areas of implementation, we found the strength in 2 separate partners. That is where we have Lumanti looking after the objective 1, supporting us the implementation, and then the objective 2 supported by Sapros Nepal. And like I have a few pictures down here just to set the context on like what the geographical challenges offers in this support, reaching out to the last mile, and then because the low-hanging fruits are all done and like satisfied, these vulnerables that we're talking about, yes, they were vulnerables spread, but right now they are located at the very hard to reach areas, challenged by the topography, road conditions, and then the weather elements. But the end goal that I have at the right bottom corner here is that the family is supported, they have a shelter that like if we refer to this picture, if we talked about the concept of like integral human development with the home at the center, it is the essence of like the social well-being. It contains all the elements, the physical elements of a shelter, the natural elements of like where it is located, how it brings the social, how it connects to the social dimensions, how it resonates with the financial needs, and then like maybe building upon from there to have a collective, like a very happy family is what we're trying to achieve in these projects. And then we're trying to share our experience while we have been doing so in previous projects as well as through this project Recover. I'll stop there and pass this mic over to Lazana, who has been supporting, who has been a champion in shelter recovery in Nepal, as well as supporting CRS in recovery implementation for livelihood and DRR. Over to you, Lazana, ma'am. Hello. Lazanaji, if you are speaking, you are on mute.
Okay, thank you, Uttamji. I just got disconnected for a minute, I think, as I could hear your last point. Okay, now I am reconnected again. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this detailed background information on the project. So as Uttamji already explained that, Lumanti is a part of this Recover project, and we are looking at reconstruction of housing, shelter, helping people, the most poor, marginalized, and vulnerable families, helping them to reconstruct the houses, to complete the houses that they have not been able to do. I'm actually, very proud, feel very good to being part of this project, because I think that this is very important initiative that we are actually making, address. We are actually making effort collectively. We are actually collectively making effort to reach out the most vulnerable who have been left behind, who have not been able to complete the reconstruction of the houses even after the nearly 7 years after the earthquake. So we are actually taking this very challenging task in reaching out those who have been left out. Next slide, please. So we have three approaches in reaching out the most vulnerable families. So we have three models, like, as this is a 3-year project, 21, 22, 23. And in the 3 years, we are aiming to reach out 4,000 the most vulnerable families, supporting them in completing the construction of their houses, right? And they are scattered in 5 districts in Kaski, Tano, Lamjung, Chitwan, and Makwanpur. And then also, like, so 5 districts and 15 rural and urban municipalities. See, these vulnerable people, families, they are not concentrated in one community. They are scattered in remote areas. Although it's a urban area municipality, also they are actually located in remote areas, very hard to access. So that is the difficult challenge also this project is actually facing. So we have 3 models in, reaching out them, providing, trying to provide necessary support. The model one is like to provide top up financial support, to complete the reconstruction or do retrofitting for the houses, like, and from this model, through this model, we are planning to reach out 3,000 families. And by the end of 2021, we have reached more than 1,000 families and helped them to get access to financial support. And many of them also have been able to complete, or can say that, 1,000 plus families have completed the houses. And then there is a second model, model 2, where we are actually trying to provide MLT support, material, labor, and also transportation support to the families to complete the houses. If the families, even if you give them cash, if there is not many people in the families actually who can go and buy the materials, for those families, if they prefer to have, like, materials, we are actually delivering the materials or providing the labor at their doorstep, so they can actually get their houses get complete. So this is the model 2, how we are actually reaching the vulnerable families. And also the last model is we are trying to fully construct 300 units of houses. That means providing shelter to 300 families who have not even started, building a house. So this model 1 and model 2 consist of those vulnerables who have actually started the houses, but then not been able to complete. But then model 3, we are trying to reach out at least 300 families who have not started anything. We have not done anything, and we are trying to we are planning, we have a plan to construct a house and then provide, fully access to full-fledged shelter for 300 families. So these are the approaches that we have taken in the Recover project. So next slide, please. So because now this project is aiming to reach out the vulnerables, the most vulnerables, but then who are the vulnerables? How we are defining them? How we know that they are vulnerables? So the government, actually the NRA, Nepal Reconstruction Authority, so the government identified, they developed a criteria and identifying the vulnerable as the single women who are above 65 years of age, or senior citizens who are above 70 plus, or the family headed by orphan children below 16 years, or the families having a disabled person in the family. They are regarded, and we are, this criteria, we are also including, this indicator of extreme poverty in identifying the vulnerable families. So in addition to the above mentioned all these criterias, we are also looking at, if they are very poor, if they are landless families, if they are the ethnic minorities, if they are poor Dalits who are facing many problems, right, because of the poverty, because of the marginalization, not only the limitation of the age barriers, but then, like, if they are very poor, like, if they are experiencing all these challenges, we are also considering them as the vulnerable families, and we are trying to reach out them. So this is this actually shows that, so we are not delivering a ready-made package of the services. We are trying to be flexible in reaching out the most vulnerable, the most needy person, in terms of, like, the age, the old people. But then, like, if there are other problems also, we are trying to provide the services, the required services for them. So now we have this criteria of the selecting the vulnerable families. But then, like, after then, what do we do? How do we identify the families? So how do we identify the families? We are identifying the families. The vulnerability is a framework. Now, within that framework, when we identify the families, to give the services, to give the support, we coordinate with the rural municipalities. It is very, very important that we actually coordinate with them, because we are actually following the government rules, regulations, policies. We are trying to work within the framework set by the government in providing services to the earthquake affected vulnerable families. So it is very important that we coordinate with the governments, with the municipalities, and they're also very, very supportive. They have contributed in setting up the enabling environment, right? That is a very supportive factor for the success of this project that we have achieved in the first year. So we work with them closely, and we also visit the communities, verify the condition of the households. So even, the name listed as a poor family, as a vulnerable, is just not enough. Like, we also visit the communities to ensure that he or she is really a poor family. So our team visits communities along with the government representatives and verify that we are reaching out the really vulnerable, the really needy person, needy family. We also review the list of the vulnerable, vulnerable list given by the government, and ensure that no one is left behind. So the government has the list of the vulnerable families. They have the list who have not been able to complete the houses. So we have that list, and we review the list, and then we actually visit. We set a series of meetings with the government. We visit the communities. That's how we finally identify the families. And then after that, we sign agreement with the families. And even in the agreement also, we also get the representatives from the local government to sign as a witness, so that there is a transparency in all the process, from the selections to all the kind of support that we are giving. So there's a transparency, and people know what we are giving, what we are delivering, how we are working, how we are reaching out. So that kind of like approaches we are taking in reaching out the vulnerable families. Right. And the next slide, please. So as I mentioned earlier that, so we have we have a flexible approach. We don't have a ready-made package support to give that, okay, this is the support that we are providing to you. No, not. So we have a tailor-made support program, so that we can actually, support the vulnerable families as per their need. So it's like, we have like, technical assistance, socio-technical assistance as there is a need. Like, some families don't have proper legal documents to be eligible to get the services, to get the tranches, like, given by the government. So there is a land dispute, land issues, family disputes, like those kind of things also. So we also provide them to address those issues. So then they have a complete paper documents, right? That kind of support also we are actually providing, in addition to the technical assistance in the constructions. We are providing orientation on process to the families. We do give them all the informations, how the government is how the government is going to deliver them the remaining tranches, what are the recent decisions taken by the government, deadline. how the house should be built, what are the requirements that they have to fulfill in order to receive the complete 3 tranches from the government, and also many other things like, monitoring the housing constructions, technical knowledge, technical know-how, all this information we actually provide to the families, so that they are very much aware about the process, how we are going to work, link with the market as well, so that we can actually procure the necessary materials and materials so that we can actually deliver to the families as per their need. I also mentioned this earlier as well, because many families would like the materials to be delivered or the labor to be provided, right, or the transportation cost to be borne by the project, so that they are able to complete the houses. Because see, they have actually received, many of them have received the first tranche from the government, that would be equivalent to about 100,000 rupees or so, but then they have not completed the houses. Some of them have done the foundation, and many of them have not been able to put the door, window, roofing. So all those are like, leftovers work, and then we are actually helping them, trying to help them to get the houses complete by providing their access to various kinds of support, like, cash top up, cash, or even the MLT, whatever there is a need, or even like technical guidance. And we also support them in the documentation process, getting registered with the government. I already mentioned about this. We also have hired masons and contractors to support in the constructions, because we are reaching out 4,000. We have a plan to reach out 4,000. Only last year we reached out more than 1,000 families. So it's a lot of work. Like, many people, many technical people need to get involved. We don't have many technical people in our team. We have to hire the local masons, contractors. We train them, we give them orientations how to do the reconstructions, how to the importance to follow the government norms in the reconstructions. So all those informations we do provide to the masons, and also to cooperate with the families as well, like, because we are actually dealing with the vulnerable families, poor families, to be sensitive on their needs and demands, and to take care of them. Like, so that's how we give the orientations to the masons. So we actually reaching out in a more sensitive manner to the poor families in the remote and rural areas. And continuous technical backstopping. So if there is a need, the families can always reach out to our team. The phone numbers are shared, and there is actually, if there is a need, they can actually call us. We do have this communication mechanism. We do have a toll-free number available for the families. If there is a need, they can actually call. They can actually give us suggestions as well. They can also demand whatever there is a need. There's a regular meeting. There's a regular follow-up visiting. A lot of things happening. So we are ensuring that there's a technical backstopping. So there is no hindrance. There is no barrier in the effort of completing the construction of the houses. We are also using all this ICT for risk communication, for DRR planning, budgeting with community and local government. So whatever we could do to make this project more effective, transparent, and also making it a dynamic kind of like, project in reaching out the vulnerable in the most possible effective way, we all are making our best. And so this building partnership at the local level is very, very important, right? Is very important. So we are actually linking the government at the federal level with the ministry. We are also communicating with the ministry. We have a link with that at the provincial level, and also at the local level as well. So it's very important, right? So local level, we are directly dealing with the rural municipalities, along with the ward offices, because they are the ones like who is actually contributing in the success of the project, so that there is no confusion, there's no chaotic situation, there is no conflict. It is also important to avoid the conflict as well, because in the past, in the reconstruction projects, many projects also have faced a conflict. There's a complaint, not happy, like, how the people are selected for the support, those kind of things. So we are trying to avoid by being very transparent and coordinating with the governments, and making the best use of the enabling environment that the government has also provided. So this is how we are partnering and then coordinating. We are also like coordinating. We also have a very good, very productive, very fruitful relationship with the families, communities. talking to them, visiting them, having a series of meetings, like, formal, informal, gathering informations like this. This is also like contributing in making the project success. And also government engineers, because they are very important partners, because the government engineers have to verify the stages of the construction. So they are the ones who actually gives approval for who they are the ones who give approval for receiving the tranche for the beneficiaries, right? So they have to go and visit the houses, they have to fill the form. So we also work with the government engineers and help them, work with them to go and visit the houses, and then also fulfill all the requirements, so that people can actually receive the tranches on time without any delay. Or if there is any suggestions from their part also, that is also conveyed to the families as well. So we actually ensure that the construction is safer, following all the norms of the government, making it more safer, right, resilient, because we're also talking about the resilient now. So we are trying to build the resilient communities, resilient houses, in order to reduce or to make the impact zero, like, for a safer living, right? With and also with other organizations, like whoever is working in the area, we also try to build a relationship with them, so that there is a synergy created in the communities. We actually provide technical assistance. But then what is the technical assistance that we're providing to the families? We help them in designing the houses. We are helping them to prepare BOQs and estimates for the constructions. We are mobilizing the mobile missions. We are also providing door-to-door technical assistance and continuous technical backstopping, as I explained this earlier. So we are actually sharing information for Build Back Better. So this is the key word, Build Back Better. This is very important, that people build their houses better than before. The houses that was destroyed by an earthquake, now they need to build better than the houses that was destroyed by the earthquake. So there is a booklet being produced that actually gives a detailed information, how to build a house, how to monitor the quality of the construction materials. You can see in the picture that we are handing this booklet to the beneficiary, to the family, so he can also go through that and do some kind of supervision of the construction by himself, right, to ensure. So we are actually supporting all the we are providing necessary informations, giving as much detailed informations as required to get the houses constructed safely and also get completed on time. Next slide, please. So you can see some photos here, the kind of houses that is being constructed in various areas, various project areas. We also promote the use of local materials, whatever is available there and whatever is cost effective, right? Stones or bricks or blocks, right? Stone blocks, bricks, or even the CSEB blocks. But the roof is always, people always prefer to have these corrugated sheets as a roof. So it's a 2-room small house, as the support is also very much limited. So it's at the maximum, it's a 350,000 rupees per house. That is what they are eligible. That's what the government has actually defined to support for the constructions of the houses. So within that amount, people have to complete the houses, but some, because that is not adequate in many cases, so people also add their own small amount of savings if they have, like, and they also use the materials that they have actually saved from the old demolished houses as well. If wherever it's possible, they have used that. But these are the kinds of like houses people have actually built in the remote villages. So we have actually learned some key lessons. So socio-technical team is very, very important to support the vulnerable houses, right? And also not a kind of ready-made package of services, but then it is very important that we cater to their, we actually provide services as per their need, whatever they require, like, how they want to build the houses, what is their need, how much they can afford, like, see, that is all those things need to be taken into consideration, and we have been working with this approach. We are providing the support in this manner. So this is, and then because we have actually completed 1,000 plus houses in the last year, and we feel that this approach has worked out, and it's a very important approach that we have actually taken, tailor-made kind of services that we are actually providing. Coordination at all levels is the must. Without coordination, collaborations, this project would not be a success. So it is very, very important to remain at the same level of understanding among all the agencies that are actually making effort to help the vulnerable families to complete the construction of their house. This family requirement, social acceptance, that is very important. The designs also, right? This is also very important. That is also part of the tailor-made approach actually. So that's how we are also trying to provide support. And this is the way, the vulnerable families need to be reached out. It's not on our own terms, but then on the people's term. That's how we need to work, on the people's term, on your own need, on your own requirement, on your own conditions, so we are trying to be as flexible as possible so that we can actually meet the demands, meet the needs of the poor vulnerable families. And also what we actually feel is so there must be these policies formulated beforehand, when to reach out the marginalized families, to reach out the vulnerable families. See, after 7 years of the earthquake now, many of the reconstructions have been completed. Many have been completed. The remaining ones are the vulnerable ones, the poor ones, as I have described earlier, with those, the vulnerable criteria that fits to them. Only those families are remaining. They have not been able to complete, because from the very beginning they have not been targeted, they have not been aimed to provide necessary support, so they are left behind. So that means they have suffered all these years without having a proper house, and in dilemmas whether they even will be able to complete the house or not, so they are the poor ones. They should be provided support in the beginning, but then that actually did not happen here. So what we actually think is so they should not be pushed behind. They should be targeted first when we actually working, designing, for this reconstruction program, or for any disaster, for any program that is addressing the disaster issues, or it could be even the climate issues. See, we are actually building these resilient houses, resilient communities. It is also for it's resilient communities also to reduce the impact of the climate as well. All right, so this can be related with the climate in various ways. It's not only for the housing, for the house of the sheikh, because we are making this presentation, we are having this space to discuss this climate conference, right? So this is very, very important, the safer houses, resilient communities is very important in order to address the climate issues as well. And then so it is also very important, not only addressing the housing need of the families, but then also to integrate with other components like water, sanitation, hygiene, and livelihood. So integrated programming is also very, very important. So then this is a complete package, at least a complete package, so people can secure their livelihoods. They have a better access to water and sanitation facilities, not only housing. If only housing is done in isolation, so many families would be deprived of the livelihood opportunities. In many communities, many families, the earthquake also made impact on the water and sanitation facilities as well. So housing alone is not adequate. So we have an integrated program in this recovery project, and that's why I think this is very important, and these are the key lessons we have actually learned from the project. Thank you. I end here. I stop here, Uttamji.
Thank you, Lajanaji. Important lessons to learn, and then the approaches, and then observations, and we pace through this long recovery. If we talk about the global scale, I think that the average recovery, post-earthquake recovery, is averaged at around 12 years. So on that account, we are not done yet. So there's a lot to do. But thank you for the efforts and setting in this forum. As you said, we are implementing integrated project here, and to talk more about the livelihood and worth. support in the project, and then the learnings beyond and like before. I would invite Dr. Smith Adhikari, Executive Director of Sapros Nepal. Over to you, Smith, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Uttam sir. Hello, everyone, and namaste. Good afternoon. And so I'm going to share my experience, our practices, our approaches about implementation of livelihood recovery and WASP program under this recover project. So I'm not going to talk about this, project participant selection procedures, or because Lajana ji has already shared that the context. I directly jump onto the livelihood recovery approach and then the WASP practices that we have started. So in total, like already Lajana ji said, we have 4,000 shelter reconstruction target, and likewise for this livelihood recovery, we have 6,000, 4,000 that we are supporting for housing reconstruction, plus additional 2,000 vulnerable community that that has been community that have been affected by this earthquake, and they don't have secure or sustained livelihood sources of income or livelihood. So we are also going to support those ones, and part of this livelihood and this shelter we are also supporting as an integrated approach. We are implementing WAS, and we are going on 56 WAS schemes, going to construct 56 WAS schemes. And in first year we completed 15 we target 1,500 livelihood households and 10 schemes. So this year, this is the second year, and we are going to target 3,000 household for livelihood support and 30 schemes. And next year, the remaining 1,500 livelihood households and the 16 schemes, WAS schemes we are going to complete. Next slide, please. Yes, so just I start with the livelihood outcomes for the vulnerables because this our project recovery is designed for the for providing the the support, building the resilient community of the vulnerable people. So and the approach that we have followed, that we have adopted for this is sustainable livelihood and resilience approach. That's the sustainable livelihood framework that's defined by the DFID in 1991. So that's not only talks about the income generation, or not only talks about the constructing the house, but it's about all 5 dimensions, 5 different types of status, stats, needs, to be built up to improve the livelihood condition and to increase the resilience. So natural dimension, natural resources, human dimension, the skills and the capacity building, this aspect we are also addressing on this project. Physical dimensions, like we already discussed on the shelters and other physical assets like walls. Financial, economic activities, and social. That's the social dimension is also very important, and we are focusing on that one because these people, vulnerable peoples, are usually left behind and they are isolated. They are socially included. So that's part social cohesion and social groups, and in joining them, their network, and linking them with the cooperatives and other forms of group is also part of this vulnerable program. So again, as Rajanaji said, we are working on targeted tailored approach to livelihood restoration for the people that's affected by this one, and that means linking the livelihood intervention with different aspects of these sustainable livelihood assets like saving credit practices, group mobilization, capacity building, disaster preparedness, and resilience. These are the different we are doing that way. So the overall pathway is we follow the LNOB leave no one behind framework, like understand for action. We need to understand the vulnerability, then empower these vulnerable people for change, and then build a safe living environment for them, safe housing construction, which we are doing under this shelter component, and then inclusion for economic opportunity and resilience, inclusion of women, vulnerable, the most marginalized, and the socially excluded groups. So that's the overall pathway of this one. So we go to the cycle, and then the vulnerability assessment, that's the and diagnostic will underpin the design and implementation of this our project. Next slide, please. So equitable support, here we are talking about equitable support based on vulnerability, because vulnerability, different kinds of vulnerability requires different support. So we focus on equitable support with the leave no one behind framework, like understanding, empowering, and including them in the economic inclusion or resilience activity. So the first part, the starting point for this is the vulnerability assessment, where we not only assess the physical these livelihood assets of the vulnerable people, of the project participants, but also resource capacity and service provision mapping to reach to these vulnerable families. And we organize them in groups and mobilize saving credits, involve them in cooperatives, and build their capacity and as a part of their human capital build up, to upgrade and to prepare them for the economic activities for the livelihood resilience. And the approach that we follow is we for the livelihood activities we carry out this on-farm, off-farm, and non-farm, all three these different interventions, and through the demonstration and promotion of low-cost, climate-resilient, innovative technologies for productivity, because the climate change has bigger impacts on these vulnerable people. So we have to focus on these climate resilience technologies and low-cost technologies, because they are resource poor people. So for the better incomes. And another is, like I already mentioned, this off-farm, non-farm activities is mainly the skill development for increased income and increased access to employment. So we do that through technical skill development, enterprise development, financial literacy, and their vulnerability allowance. In some cases where there is elderly people or the disabled people that they are not able to engage in on-farm activities, then we prioritize on this one. Again, we follow the targeted and tailored approach for this one. So even within the same geographic location or within the similar socioeconomic condition, the interventions, the nature of the intervention, the types of the intervention, or the intensity of the intervention could be different, because it's tailor-made. Yeah, next slide, please. So the practices, I continue on this practices, it's scaling up and diversification. That's another important part of this for the sustainability, or for increased competitiveness of these vulnerable people, because if they have to survive, they have to compete with the non-vulnerable people. So this increased competitiveness of the Fiji for economic resilience through market system development support, and then institutionalization of their enterprises is our focus area, is how we work for that. And we don't do that alone. We collaborate, we coordinate with the local governments and other key stakeholders for their support, for technical support, for resource leverage, so that there's local governments, at the end of the day, the local governments, they take the ownership of these activities, intervention, achievements, and its goals sustainable. So these local governments not only do the ownership of these ones, the activity that we are starting, they also replicate under their different program, their budget, their activities, they replicate these ones, these institutional arrangements and these support mechanisms for better service delivery to the vulnerable community for their better livelihood outcomes. And so these ones, we also empower these vulnerable people to take part in these local governments' annual budget activities and budget planning process. Because usually the planning process in the local government or government system used to be top-down approach, but now it's becoming bottom-up approach. And these people, even the vulnerable people, are part of that. And their interests, their needs, and their demands are also included in the recent days. So another important part for this, for better livelihood outcomes, is the private sector or the local market actors. We can't leave them while talking about the livelihood outcomes. So capacity building of these private sectors is important part, and we are considering, we are taking this approach, this practice even in our project for better service delivery, particularly the input supply and the technical support to the farmers in absence of any support agencies or any bodies, because there is a market mechanism. That's how the market system builds there, and the market system works in that community with the vulnerable people. Next slide, please. So while talking about the that's the livelihood, but livelihood standalone is not possible without the water scheme, because we are focusing more on agro-based on farm and on off-farm activities. So the water, and these are the very important component, very important part of this. That's why we designed this project integrating this shelter, livelihood, and wash components, and the wash services and intervention processes. That the WAS services includes aspects of construction of WAS schemes, cost recovery for because we at the design phase, from the design phase, we consider sustainability of those schemes, because in the past there were many schemes that were built, but for the lack of this operation and maintenance and repair is a complete failure. So we consider that from the beginning, and safe personal hygienic behavior. Water availability is not enough. We try to bring the social behavior change communication. We practice that one, so that the vulnerable people, they stay healthy and in well good environment. So again, the process involves collaboration with the community and local government for scheme identification, cost leverage, insurance, because insurance is important for this, source registration, and ownership of these schemes by the community itself, by the beneficiaries itself, and by the local governments and key stakeholders. That's also another important part for sustainability and smooth operation and maintenance. So then when we identify these schemes, then we rank it, and need-based and highly ranked schemes that also have this livelihood components, and is not the demand only the demand based. We focus on the demand based, not on the supply based. They are finalized, and the community peoples are involved in the construction and construction of these activities, from this planning to the completions, and we carry out this public auditing, social auditing at the end of the before the handover of these schemes and scheme to the local government, and so that the transparency and accountability is maintained, and we also try to demonstrate this, is that how the transparency can be maintained. So this is also a part of learning for the local governments and other stakeholders, that how they should implement these projects, and so that's also the part of the learning. So insurance of the victim, we encourage the local governments for insuring the schemes, because this ownership is taken by the local governments, and we hand over the schemes in presence of the local governments to the community, in presence of the local governments. And these schemes are usually, is not like just drinking water, not just the sanitation, is productive water use, like multi-use water system. We go for the multi-use water system, even the use or utilization, best utilization of the wastewater for livelihood and residents. That's one precondition for these was when we rank these schemes. That's one of the preconditions for these scheme finalizations. Next one, please. Yeah, as at the beginning, Uttam sir said there are many challenges or gaps in this implementing these livelihoods and WAS activities, and also the shelter activities. So that's why we have seen several gaps and challenges and areas for improvements while designing this one, and we consider these aspects too while designing this one. Some of the activities that we have incorporated, and we are working in that line, and some of the gaps still we need to work on that one, but at least we have identified this one. We have seen these activities, these challenges, and we are going to work on this line. For example, is this vulnerable support planning used to be done without any adequate information. So that's what we change in our project. The availability, sourcing, use is important for this one. So for that we take some time and carry out the vulnerability assessment, and then only we go for design and implementation of the project. Similarly, the soft skill part, because these vulnerable people are already dominated, excluded, and they have very low confidence level, and while going to involving them in any of the livelihood or WAS activities, that's not going to result in good outcomes. So soft skills, life skills is important for them. Psychosocial counseling could be a part of this, and that's the important part for the sustainability and for motivating them to come to this livelihood activities, and then establishing market linkage, value chain, and Um, so that's important. Without that, the return of investment is very low compared to the non-vulnerable. So that's the one area we are going to work on this one, and we are achieving at a higher return on investment. So value chain ladder is similar to this point that we just discussed, return to investments, because they are low in the value chain ladder. So they have very little financial access and very little financial literacy, and thus is where they are having poor bargaining power and very poor performance in terms of enterprise development or in terms of livelihood incomes. So markets, they are still not considered key factors. Only the bigger wholesalers or bigger marketers, market actors dominate. So the local market and linking them, networking them with the local market for this local livelihood recovery activities, that's still lacking. So usually the market system, they are one-off and very unsystematic. So we are also working on these one, developing a market system approach and linking them with these vulnerable people so that they develop a market in their itself and sustain that market for that one. And gender and inclusion, we have talked a lot about these gender and inclusion issues, but it's not fully mapped before planning or implementing the activities. So that's one of the points we considered before planning and designing this recovery projects, and we are very thoughtful, very seriously taking this issue throughout the implementation on every aspect of this one. And tailored support through holistic program of recovery is important. That's why we designed this one. Otherwise, usually recovery is there, and there are this, because of this, there are several examples that displaced people, internally displaced people due to earthquake, they were put in separate housing were built for them, but people didn't go and live there because they didn't have any wash facility there, or they didn't have any livelihood activities to live there and sustain their life. That's why we focus on these integrated approach: shelter, wash, and livelihood activities. So it's a holistic program that we are doing. But it's still the gaps. It's there in this livelihood recovery activities in other projects, and so this from these activities, from our practices, and from learning from these gaps and challenges, and implementing while implementing recovery projects, we have few learnings that I'm going to present here. Yeah, as the tailor-made support based on capacity, needs, and vulnerability, that's the main thing. That's the lawn we have for the success, for the better livelihood outcomes. So social engagement of non-vulnerable is equally important. Sometimes we forget that part, which is equally important. So financial resilience to rapid livelihood, that's the important part. Financial resilience need to be strengthened. So market, individual based, better is market, group-based market approach. That's the one we need to focus on. So market linkage ensures sustainability. There's which part is lacking. So we have strengthened, we have worked on strengthening the market linkage and coordination with local governments. So not only leverage the resources, but it reduces, minimizes the risk and replicates and the sustainability and ownership of the things, of the projects, and then also they develop policies and actions that will have long-term effect in the community. So finally, the WAS interventions for vulnerable people. So the one important learnings is now people are engaged in taking responsibility for long-term operation and maintenance needs, so that the sustainability can be ensured. That's one good learning. People have themselves come forward for that one, and there used to be lots of downstream and upstream conflict in this WAS schemes. So we have started doing a source registration and multi-use water system, which has significantly contributed to reduce this conflicts between upstream and downstream people. So institutional strengthening, the groups were formed, like in the past, these groups used to be formed, they were involved in the construction of these schemes, then they dissolved. But institutional strengthening is very important for the sustainability of these schemes, and we have been working on that one. So the interventions that are, if they are supply led, then they are not going to sustainable. So we have focused on the interventions that are primarily demand-led and are livelihood-based, linked with the livelihoods, which leads to sustainability. And monitoring is also on livelihood outcomes. We monitor these activities not only on the WAS inputs and outputs, but also on the livelihood outcomes. So that's how we can measure or the monitor these whole outcomes of this whole integrated approach. So this way, integrating these three different components, and we form this recovery projects, and that's how we are working and building resilient community in the face of the disaster. That's how we are leading, and we are very hopeful that we will be able to build a resilient community and serve these vulnerable people on a sustainable manner. Um, thank you. I think that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much. Back to you, Thumbs Up.
Thank you, Sunitji. Excellently captured. And I would also like to thank the participants and panelists here for your patience. We are slightly like stretching the time that we had allocated in the schedule. But let me summarize like on what we learned from like individual presentations from Lumanti and Chapros on like how they are supporting the vulnerable. Like Laznaji was saying earlier that yes, this is a big opportunity that we had maybe in other areas when a big disaster strikes. We always have this opportunity. We have we are sorry for the losses, but the losses and then damages also bring this opportunity to build back. And then build back, how is build back better? Like better on the sides of like how the communities are set up. Maybe the losses could be taken as opportunities to make resilient community, in sense like this case it was an earthquake that brought the damages. Earthquake resilient houses are being built. The families are being made aware of the other risks, multiple risks that they are facing, and they are like oriented in how they can prepare for those better. But in doing all this, what we should learn, as was said by the colleagues earlier, was that we should take the vulnerables at the forefront of our support design and implementation. They cannot be the last one to be supported because their needs are higher, their vulnerabilities are higher. The whole family is at stake. So we need to like maybe in the like other implementations, God forbid no, but if it occurs, we need to be thinking about like what policies allow the vulnerable support, how they are supported better, how their livelihoods could be restored so that they are resilient to future shocks and disasters. So that I think is a very important takeaway. The second one was like there are existing systems, but as well like there are systems that could be developing. So like our efforts in supporting these needs could be much like well invested in coordination and facilitation, bringing them together, working together, because in silos we are lost and doing a very little job. In when we are together, like organizations, government systems, all these coming together, we will be able to make larger impacts, as was seen in Nepal when we were together, coordinated and implementing and supporting the people at need. We're doing better, and rather than like doing in silos here and there. There's also this approach of like we're talking about the leave no one behind, but we should also be considerate of like do no harm, meaning like we should reach the last mile, through the last mile to support these vulnerable people. But like helping only the vulnerable might not be the ideal solution. We should be having a flexible approach to support delivery, meaning it is available to all but targeted to the vulnerables. That would be the best win-win in these kind of large emergencies. What we learned maybe in Nepal's recovery efforts, as well as the presentation shared by the colleagues earlier. Lumanti, as well as Laznaji, as well as Sunitji were saying earlier, that the feedback mechanisms on how they were, like the participants, the local communities were able to reach out to us on like if they had any issues, if they have any concerns. This leads to very effective programming, and maybe it should be built into every recovery and response emergencies that we deliver across this region. There is another very key learning that the technology transfer like could ensure that should be in line that it is sustainability is ensured. We're also investing in like behavioral changes, because like it cannot be that people only invest in resilient like for say like earthquake resilient housing technologies because the government is subsidizing the reconstruction. It should be like the investment should be that the people understand what they are doing. So like what are the perks of like having a resilient home so that the families can be safe in the future. There are multiple disasters that these like across our region we face, and then like with this climate change, like increasing the risks in our region, especially, we need to be prepared. We need to have our communities prepared for multiple hazards, and how we can do that is like making sure that risk is communicated all, like to the like communities. They know what to do, how to build those preparedness, those steps for the upcoming disasters in every chance that they have. And right, importantly, throughout the both presentations by Lumanti and Sapros, we heard the importance on how, from their experiences in previous to recover as well as in this project, they value the integrated programming to like address the multifaceted needs and vulnerabilities of these vulnerable communities. That is how they are vulnerable. That is how they should be supported to break those barriers and then like move towards like increased resilience. These are my summaries of like how the presentations went, but we have our commentators as well who are experts in respective fields, and like I would like welcome like our respected commentators in shelter, WAS, and overall recovery, like one by one, and like ask them to introduce themselves as well as like share their opinions of about the overall recovery and reconstruction in Nepal, in addition to the efforts being made by SAPROS in Lumanti in vulnerable support after about 5 to 6 years of implementation. Like we said about like who they are, how, what we're doing, and how we're doing it. Like, what is your take on that? For that, I would just like invite Professor Dr. Sangeeta Singh first to comment on the shelter approach of things, but also on the overall recovery and reconstruction. Ma'am, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So this was a very interesting presentation, and I enjoyed a lot hearing to all the presentations that were made. And I think it was a very good collective effort, I must say, where recovery itself is a very challenging process. And amidst all the challenges, how the housing reconstruction has been done, how the livelihood has been integrated, how WASH has been integrated, was a very good learning experience for me as well. And so I think if you focus a bit on the shelter part as you requested, the approaches are good, and the way in which the reconstruction has been handled in the overall sense, has to some extent neglected the sustainability aspect as a whole, not only in this particular approaches that we have been talking now, but in the overall approaches. Wherever the reconstruction activities have happened, we have to some extent neglected the sustainability aspect of it, and the integration of the communities and the participatory approach in identifying the needs and so on has been a little bit neglected, I would say, because you can see many examples. For example, in Barpak, if you see, also the settlement the settlement program which was implemented in Laprak, you can see that the settlement is still not habilitated, and people are not staying in those settlements that have been built. And it talks a lot about the need for the participatory approach in identifying the ways of going forward with the shelter programs as such, because in Laprak you can see that the area, the location itself was a bit on the negative side, and then it was not well discussed with the communities, so you can see the result of it. But having said that, I think in all the approaches that Lumanti has done, in which the SAPROS has participated, I think these were commendable efforts. But having said that, I would say that in any reconstruction projects, it would be good if we also take the sustainability aspects into consideration. Like, for example, in the building materials, it is good that the local materials are being used, and these cater to the sustainability aspect. But if you look at all the reconstruction that is happening all over the places in rural areas as such, the CGI sheets are being used. So if you look at the sustainability aspect of the CGI sheets and the aspects of thermal efficiency, the energy efficiency, and so on, this is not such a good material, but still we have been promoting it. Right. So after the earthquake, if you visit any rural areas, you will see that it is filled with all the CGI sheets instead of the slate roof that we had. So we could have gone a bit on the research aspect of finding ways and means of improving the slate roofs. If these were not structurally efficient, then we could have done some sort of research, and that is where the academic sector also plays a major role, right? So we could have identified sustainable building materials in terms of look. For example, the traditional vernacular architecture is almost gone in all the reconstruction that we have done. So we have not paid attention to the vernacular architecture aspect. The elements have all been gone. If you look at all the traditional settlements, these used to have a sort of an essence. It used to have an identity, which is now lost because we are going for more modern technology, modern construction materials, and we are neglecting the vernacular part. The vernacular architecture is gone. So this has affected the livelihood to a certain extent because this is linked with tourism and so on. So people used to come to Bar Park to observe the planning, the buildings, and the vernacular architecture and so on. But now people might not be interested to visit these areas anymore, right? So this part, I think, needs to be considered in future reconstruction activities, let's say. And again, I think the co-production aspect is also very important. It's important to discuss with the communities with regard to their needs and family aspirations, and so on and so forth, which seems to be a bit not on the forefront in all the reconstruction activities. It was tailor-made to a certain extent, but then it did not reflect the proper need of the families and so on. So that is why we see a lot of two-room homes that are not utilized, that are underutilized. It is not being used for settlement as such, but it is used for storage and so on and so forth. So it looks like it has been built just for securing the amount that has been allocated. So that part has to be looked into, I think. And also of course, like you also mentioned, along with the shelter comes the basic infrastructure. So without basic infrastructure, standalone homes, standalone shelters would not work. So integration with WASH is very, very important, and more so with the livelihood, right? So if it is not linked with the livelihood, then there's huge problem. And in most of the rural areas, if you see, the livelihood is based on natural resources, right? Whatever natural resources are available, this is linked with the livelihood. So when you talk about livelihood, it's not only water and agriculture, but also I think the forest areas that have to be mentioned, and all the livelihoods related to all these different natural resources would have to be integrated. And if you're talking about WASH, then it would be good to address also some of the issues that come with it, with the access to basic infrastructure. But in terms of integration of WASH, we could also be talking about the sustainability aspect of it. For example, integrating the rainwater harvesting, the recharging, and water reuse and recycling, and so on and so forth. So I think these livelihood, WASH should go hand in hand with shelter recovery. And so if you do that, then most probably it would be a holistic approach. But having said that, I think what comes foremost whenever reconstruction is happening is that we have to identify the vulnerable communities, of course, and build back better is the key, of course. But not only better, but it has to be sustainable. I think build back better and sustainably also should be the key word, I think. And of course, the coordination and facilitation plays a key role. And what matters the most is the linkage and the integrated approach with the other aspects like WASH and livelihood recovery. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Sogita ma'am. Very well said and captured, I guess. Your expertise and then like your experience in the sector was well like captured in like how you went through the presentation being shared, as well as like what you have observed and then like witnessed in Nepal's recovery. Thank you, ma'am, again. We have next to comment specifically on WASH and livelihoods, but also broadly on the overall recovery and reconstruction in Nepal, Mr. Kabir Das Rajbhandari. Kabirji, if you would unmute, put yourself on video if that is possible, introduce yourself, and then please do comment on what you saw in this presentation, as well as overall recovery and reconstruction in Nepal. Kabirji, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Uttamji, for providing me this opportunity to comment on the interesting presentations made by Lasnaji from Lumanti and Sunitji from Sapros. Very well said, looking at the context, and very well said at the situation that we went through. So I think the presentations that both of them made is very timely, I would say, as we are struggling to get rid of this trauma of earthquake of 2015. So looking when, as given the response by the organizer, if you look at when I'll start from the livelihood and WASH, which Sapros presented. So I'll go from the very interesting part of the presentation is that the integration. Basically, the integration is very interesting part that both the presenters highlighted on, which is definitely a start game for ending up with sustainability aspects. And looking at both the presenters and specifically the presenters of Sapros, when we look at from the this shelter and livelihood and WASH. So when we look at the holistically the things in the development, so when the shelter comes, definitely that demands WASH. And when both are there, definitely the mutual thing that they need is basically the livelihood, particularly the generation of income for their own sustenance. So once the people or households do not have their own sustenance, then how they can think of the sustenance of entire system or development products, I would say. So in that part, the integrations that they have looked upon, or they have tossed upon, or they have tried to make sure it is well taken up by the project is well appreciated. And another one that I really appreciated on both the cases approach is the flexible approach. So when there's a very rigid approach, then it maybe sometimes we could face difficulties in terms of not only achieving the target, but also making sure that the things go the very right direction. So the flexible approach, but both the presenters took on when they are executing project is very another impressive thing. And the third one, I would say that the partnering with LGs, partnering with the local governments, which is not only the mandatory from the development horizon, but also it is very interesting, and the way that they have partnered with. Also, I would say that once this recover project concluded, then I'm sure that these LGs with whom they partnered will take care of the things after they are handed over to the concerned communities. Next one is, as they both of them have highly highlighted about the leave no one behind. So in those groups, definitely these vulnerable groups or the groups that were affected by these earthquakes are definitely the vulnerable groups. And both of them have attempted to target to reach these groups from their services or from the project outputs or outcomes. And that is also another welcoming part of this presentations, and I would say that the project itself. And definitely another one is mostly when we look at the WASH interventions, mostly these WASH interventions, normally if you see that in the current development trend, they normally go on silos. And in this case, this has been linked with livelihood, which is I think one of the most interesting, not only the interesting, most the careful way of delivering the WASH to looking from the aspects of sustainability. And another important part is that, as Suniji mentioned, that they have incorporated multiple use of sources for the livelihood generation and income generations from these targeted groups with WAS. And that I am sure that this will not only helps to manage the water at the household level, but also to ensure that there would be better persons to make sure that the services they are getting from these water supply users committees will be sustained, because they're once they get opportunities of these facilities, and they want to make sure that these facilities should run or should operate or should functions for the long-term period. So that would be another part of ensuring sustainability. So these, and another one is that the interesting part by both the presenters, I would say, is that they attempted to bring in the private sector on board. If you look at the past development trend, if you look at the past development scenario, we normally neglect the private sector. Now the time has come, and most of the development practitioners has concentrated need of private sector on board in this development mainframe. So I think to whatever scale these both presenters attempted to bring the private sector on board, and that's a very welcoming part. And of course, now there's things needs to move from the freely receiving services to kind of paying services to ensure that the services are sustained. And another part I would really appreciate is that the feedback mechanisms both the team expressed for the feedback mechanism they have adopted in your service delivery or in the project delivery approach, which is very important from the perspective of accountability and responsiveness from both the service providers and both the users or service receivers at the same time, and also from the regulating units or duty-bearer side. So these are very interesting, and I would say that the welcoming and the good part of this project. So hope and all the lessons learned, all the gaps that were discussed, and all the lessons learned that were discussed here will be captured gradually in this journey of recover project till the end of this project, so that some of them will be captured and furthermore lessons will be learned that will be shared. So when you look at the critics part, I would say that some of the things were already commented by Dr. Sangeeta-ji. So not repeating, but just looking at the thing is that particularly I'll be focusing on this on is livelihood and WAS, which Suniji presented. It's good. I think all these good parts, but I'm not clear how they have looked upon the post-implementation support once the whole system has been handed over to the communities, because this is they have already linked this WAS facilities with a livelihood. If in a system one component does not function properly, then it hampers the system. So we need to think of how this post-implementation support mechanism has been devised or designed or looked upon while working with local government. Of course, they are partnered with local governments, and everything should not be assumed that once we partner, once we work with local governments, everything will be taken care of by the local governments once we hand over. So those are things I think still there's a time that they have a time to think through, to look at, and to be mindful on this aspect to make sure that whatever efforts they have been making will be sustained. The next one I would say is that one interesting part and one very good part of this WAS interventions that Suniji was mentioning is about insurance, which is a very, very important thing nowadays. The WAS professionals are now looking at how these insurance companies could be brought up so that they could insure the WAS infrastructure as a non-life insurance component. So this is very good part, but still in that case, I'm a little bit skeptical is that how once this entire system is handed over to the communities, how this the continuation of this insurance part, particularly paying the premium, or how this will be continued. And there's a kind of I have a little bit concern how this has been taught on to make sure that these things goes on. Normally in the practice is that, based on my experiences, once we did very good things and once we make the things happen and continuation is expected, train the people, but once we left or once we handed over those projects to these people, then very less people continue to these line of thinking. So that's my suggestions to the team is that continue and think of this, how this could be sustained and how could this be worked out even after Sapros phase out from that areas. And another one is, as we are talking about the disaster management, and we are for that we are working through this recovery project, and we've been delivering the services or facilities to people. But I'm a little bit not clear from that how these WAS facilities have been made a bit resilient to disaster, which I mean could come up from different aspects. In this case, the things are being addressed for the earthquake disaster, but later on, not only looking at earthquake, as some of the colleagues said that Nepal is still in a very disaster-prone zone. So that could be a kind of a landslide, flood, or maybe public health or something like that. How this whole entire system of WAS has been ensured to make them resilient to the disaster. I'm not clear. Maybe Sunitji and the team might have thought of and might have worked on that, and that have, because of time constraint, they could have explained on that. Next one is definitely we are addressing the affected people and making our services resilient. I'm sure that we have also addressed when we are delivering or when we are attempting to provide water facilities, we have also addressed the water quality concerns that we normally have when we are developing or when we are implementing water supply facilities. Because this, I hope that all these all these aspects related to water quality is taken care of, so that it will not bring another public health disaster. So that's a hope this has been taken care of. So it should not be the case that we provided services and later on it brings another disaster because of the low water quality, so poor water quality. Another one is so how next one is, I'm sure that still there are time of implementation. I would like to suggest the whole team that how the team are looking at the continuation of the sustainability from the design they have thought on, from the flexible approach they have taken up, and from the good part of it that I've mentioned before, how this could be continued and could lead to sustainability. So these are the things I hope that that will come up when we are moving towards the journey of this recover and addressing the gaps that already identified from the lessons that have been learned from this halfway of the journey. So another one is just I want to touch upon. So the good part of is this. Yes.
Kavi sir, like we are a little short on time. The organizers are trying to close this one so that they could start the other one.
Can you give me a minute? Can you give me a minute?
Yes, 1 minute, sir. 1 minute.
Just what I'm going to highlight is that since we are looking at disaster or resilient, we also need to think of water management or water resource management, so that whatever interventions that we are making on water supply or WAS should not be should not face another challenge of water insecurity. So what I would suggest is that we need to think of water augmentation mechanism as we used to, exploit the water for water service for good purpose of providing water supply facilities to people, but also we also need to think of how we could make the entire water security perspective work or function. So for which I think this needs to be, we need to be a little bit think of and mindful of being water resource management. I think the most approach that SAPROS is taking care of is a part of that, and it should be continued when we are when we are extracting water sources. Lastly, what I would say is that for the whole thing, we need to take one water approach, considering everything we do on water is one water, be it wastewater, be it water, be it rainwater, be it groundwater. We all need to consider as a one water approach, and for this to sustain, definitely we need to think of, not if wherever possible, make sure watershed level. Our considerations should be that whatever we do, we should not pollute or we should not contaminate the water sources, but attempt to make augmentation of the water sources. Having said this, thank you very much for all the presenters, and from the overall this side, we are from the emergencies period of 2015. Now we are at a recovery. We are at the phase of recovery towards development. I would say that we are now more at the development phase. So we need to think of how this trade-off can be made from recovery, from transiting from recovery to development. So I would request to Lajnaji and her team and Suryaji and his team to see and carefully consider how we could transit from recovery to development, so that whatever interventions that we made to this recovery project will be sustained and continued in this development phase. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Kabirji, for that comment. Echoing through Dr. Sangeeta and Kabirji's comment, where the issue, the areas to improve on sustainability, ensuring that it is baked into the programming itself. But in the interest of time, I might not be able to pose that as a question to the presenters, but I would ask Mahavir Acharya to summarize his experience in the Bhuj earthquake, as well as the Nepal earthquake, as well as the presentations that we just shared, and then the previous commentators on what areas that they identified as strength and weaknesses and rooms for improvement going forward. Mahavirji, we have very little time towards the end, but your expertise would mean and sharing comments would mean a lot on how we are doing, what areas could be further improved in the overall recovery and discussion, as Kabirji was saying, as we move towards development from recovery. Mahavirji, in a very short, if you may, can you please comment on the presentations made today, as well as overall recovery and response in Nepal? Mahavirji, over to you. Maybe if we could summarize this in 5 minutes, I'll be very grateful to you all.
Thank you. Definitely, I'll try my best.
Thank you.
So I think, first of all, I appreciate that. I really appreciate Lajana ji and the other presentation, and I feel it really cover the most of the points which defined as the part of this initiatives. Actually, I feel really blessed to work in Nepal, because I learned lots of things from the community of Nepal and the people of the Nepal. And I really say, okay, Nepal has shown the path about the all, how to recovery made in the disastrous situation. Because in even in vulnerability, even in Gorkha, when we started working, we thought that's why this four or five criteria. Let's broaden this criteria. Otherwise, we cannot, cover the real things. So we broadened the scope of criteria. We found that instead of 695, we have 8,000 beneficial people who comes under the vulnerability. As because you said in initially presentation, where your vulnerability people are 2.2% of total affected people, where your index is 28.6%. So there's quite big gap where the people are still vulnerable, but doesn't fit in the criteria. If I can say 65 years old lady can have headed, woman headed can be vulnerable, what about 64? So there are a lot of many debates can happen on this. But if you broaden a little bit base, then really you go one-to-one. And as Lajana ji said very rightly, it's a tailor-made. You have to meet each person and find out what is the issues. Some may be fit within the criteria, and some may be fit not criteria, but maybe both can be addressed. How both can be addressed is very important. Because in village, if you ask the village people or village head that how many 5 people are most vulnerable, you can suggest the name. They can suggest 5 names. Maybe 2 will fit in your criteria. Maybe 3 will not fit in that criteria. How you will address those kind of things? So it's very important how make the also harmony in the village instead of doing some interventions. So that is also challenging. In part of Lumanti, in both separates also, because they are working in very, very scattered area. Where Nepal, in Gorkha, we are working only just Gorkha region. There are 27,000 houses. I was asking always my, the coordinators and the engineers that if you are not there, people anyway, they build the houses. But you are here to just because people are not able to build the houses. If you can support them, because last mileage is very important. And really it has happened because 22,000 houses built very fast, but remaining 5,000 houses took more than 1 year. So that true that itself it says that meaning that there is a lot of energies required to meet them and to facilitate them for reconstruction. So this is always happening. And regarding other parties' cost, when talking to vulnerable people, important is the cost, because 3 lakhs rupees maybe that time may be sufficient, but today is in context maybe it's not sufficient. So inflation is so much high, even the cost is some high. But initially people are not maybe facilitated to build. They maybe started bigger houses and end up with nowhere and in between there are. So there are a lot of this kind of stories are there. But I still appreciate the authorities which allow a lot of when you're talking to, I'm just agree with Sangeeta ji that we lost a little bit of vernacular architecture, but even the government of Nepal is provided a lot of, technically lot of things they approved. Like I very appreciate that masonry with mud mortar, stone masonry mortar. This only happened in, Nepal. And in Gorkha, I was surprised by the figure that only 15% house built with, RCC houses, where the 40% houses with brick, and again 35 or something 60%, 35% houses built with stone masonry mud mortar. If you just calculate the carbon footprints, it's very impact on the climate change issue in now today's we are talking. So Nepal has really shown the path. The containment technology, we are talking since 2001 earthquake, we are not able to get it approved in India. But finally, Nepal has, take a bold step and approve those technologies, and people are able to build it. So I really appreciate authorities for that. But regarding vulnerability, I think it's big challenge for, I think, Lumanti and both the teams, because they're very scattered. And to work in scattered, it's required a lot of efforts, a lot of human resource, a lot of, coordination. And these people are really, you have to find out very creative solutions. Like we found in Gorkha that there is very creatively some palikas has created this revolving funds. From the development fund, they created revolving fund. They were supporting vulnerable families. Maybe they are coming in the criteria, not in the criteria. Even this funds helps to create housing. So that kind of environment, and I'm very confident that both of these organizations very competent to deal with work with the coordination with the local government, local like municipality or local Gama Palikas and all the things. So I think it's very important in such moment, like international organization also give some little bit free hand to the grassroots organizations like Lumanti and all, because if you are working in the villages, maybe some people require some different kind of supports. So how these supports can be provided, there's real time to think that how this can be, otherwise there is always conflict, because you only finalize the supporting the people where they are on the list because they are part of the filter system. But people who are not part of the filter system, it may be they are left out. So in recovery process, because to work with the whole community and mobilize them is a very difficult task, and they are doing difficult work. And really I appreciate the way they have organized the things, and they each tailor-made solutions they're giving to the people. This is the most key of success key, like they're mobilizing mobile masons. This is very important. Engineers are not able to go to the villages, and it's very successful in Gorkha. Also, we have appointed more than 140 master masons who are providing support to the households. So here is the same. I think these mobile masons are very important. They are the really key persons who really can go to each house owner and motivate him to build. Say, I am there, I am here, I will support you regarding technicality or regarding other things. And a lot of recycling happen, a lot of reuse of the resources. That is happens overall in the Nepal also. And I hope this will happen in this project also, which is the key. Because when talking the resilient community, I was always, many times I was talking to Dr. Botharaji, he was saying that stone masonry houses is the key of, we can say the sustainability in this region, where a lot of abandoned stones are available. People are used to build those kind of, in village there are resources to do this kind. If we switch the things with the new technology, we will be nowhere. And so that's why, because only you have to, apply the principles of earthquake safety. Material can be anything. So that this happens in the mass scale, even Nepal. I think it will be happen also in this vulnerable program for the people for vulnerable who's supposed to get the benefit of this program. So I want to just summarize, because time is very less. So I think this kind of arrangements are very important, and sustainability also directly connect with local resource and local material. If you train people for the use of those kind of things, definitely the sustainability automatically come, because finally the local people train resilient community. What we're talking about resilient community is the community who knows to handle their disaster situation with their own resources. If you prepare them for those kind of situations, their own material, their own resources, their own people, then I think this is the best program. And I think Lumanti and Sapres both are doing in those direction. And I congratulate both of them. But my questions also remain the same: how scattered work they can integrate with the very limited resource of the people. But still, Sangitaji's question always remind me we lost some of vernacular. Nepal is known for that. Sometimes we have always, something in heart that why these things happen. Not even in in Nepal, but all over the world. This when disaster happened, we lost a lot of our heritage, our way of wisdom, and our knowledge system which exists in centuries, and we just turn it and create some another disaster sometime happens. So this program I hope that we proceed the direction of sustainability, make the people resilient, use of local skill and material, make them cost effective, and give them total confidence. And I'm very happy to understand this, that housing is not a really technical thing, it's social process. And once house is built, it is also required to live the life and the livelihood support, which the very sustainable way that is thought. I think I appreciate, and they will continue more and more. And they're very experienced, I think, organization. I need not to so much of advise them, but I should actually appreciate and support them, because now it's a real task, toughest task to reach out those people. It is not easy. In reconstruction, you can build thousands of houses, but last mile house, like 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 or 5,000, this is the last house which is required really, support. And I appreciate that both they're able to do it. And CRS also maybe join hands to hands and support them in this whole process. Thank you.
Thank you, Mahavirji, Kabirji, and Sangita-ji for your comments. Largely echoing through your comments, where the ideas of sustainability and how it is built, so that all the things that we're doing now last in within the community, so that they can use their local technologies, their local materials to make sure that the risks are minimized and the vulnerabilities are reduced, right? So I'll park these questions on the best, we are always sort of on time today as well. So we'll park these questions that the commentators as well as a few colleagues had shared previously for discussion for a next one, maybe sometime very soon, where we can all come together and then start from this point going forward. But I was instructed from the organizers, we need to wrap up now. But before I do that, I would like to thank you for all your time, inputs, and present support to make sure that these vulnerable people are supported, their needs are met, and then we contribute to building a resilient society. Me myself, Uttam, would like to thank you, the participants, the commentators, for your time, for your presence and inputs. Lajna ma'am, we have as Executive Director of Lumanti, and Dr. Sunit Adhikari, Executive Director of Sapros Nepal. We team that we presented and facilitated. Thank you all for this evening and the great discussions.